The other day I was talking about holding high views, and one of those views is the view of Buddha nature. And so I'd like to look at a little bit about what that means, why it is we are told that all beings are Buddha. So if we look at the sutric sources, then we have the discourse on the king of meditative concentration. And in that it says, the Sugata bliss-gone essence completely pervades all wandering beings. So these wandering beings are what we call sentient beings. And that's because we wander aimlessly through samsara from one life to another until we become enlightened or we achieve awakening. And then from the concise discourse on transcendence, so this is another reference from the sutras, it says, all beings have the essence of the thus gone suchness. So this thus gone suchness is Tathagata Garbha. We've got Sugata Garbha and Tathagata Garbha. Now, Sugata comes from the term sukha. And sukha is where we get our word in English for sugar. So it means bliss or happiness. And Tathagata is that which is that. So it's suchness we sometimes translate it as, the way things are. Now the interesting point here is this other term, garbha. And this can be translated as womb or potential or essence. Now there's a lot of debate about this term, this part of this term that's used in Sanskrit to refer to the Buddha nature. So as it is taught, there are two potentials. One is the natural potential or the natural disposition, and the other is the developing potential or the developing disposition. Now the natural potential is the essence of the way things are, just how they abide. And this developing potential is a necessary element for beings to progress, for them to become Buddha. And there's a lot of debate about this, whether this developing potential is a catalyst for attaining Buddhahood, or whether that this developing potential means that there is this fully developed Buddha nature in every sentient being. It's a huge topic of debate, and there's little agreement. But what we can see from these quotes from the sutras is that the point is not that all sentient beings are in fact Buddhas or have all the qualities of Buddhas, but that they have the essence or the potential to become a Buddha. So that is either that they have a fully evolved Buddha nature essence in their being, or that they have this potential, sort of like a seed for enlightenment. So further from the extensive discourse on transcendence, it says, for example, as milk is pervaded by butter, so too are all sentient beings pervaded by the Buddha nature. So clearly here it's saying that all sentient beings have this. It doesn't matter whether you are a little worm or a human being, that we all possess this Buddha nature. And from the ornament of greater vehicle discourses, so that's the Mahayana Sutras, it says, for each and every one there is that suchness. So again, that way things are exists for all beings, possessed of purity and without distinction. So this is something that is pure, and there is no distinction of high or low between any being. Because the thus gone itself is just that. This Tathagata, this thus gone, is exactly that. Is exactly that this essence is without distinction and exists in every one. So too are all wandering beings possessed of its essence. So in that way, all wandering beings have this essence. Within the sutric sources, it seems quite clear that what is being talked about here is a potential or an essence that all beings possess. And in that way, they are all equal. And the way I was taught is that because we all have mind, then we all have this Buddha nature. But where did this teaching come from that states all beings are Buddha? I mean, that sounds a little bit contradictory. It's like saying every being, whoever they are already Buddha. Well, this comes from the Vajrayana. And what you have to understand is that the Vajrayana view is the view of purity. So the view of a Vajrayana practitioner is that all beings are like deities in sexual union, and they possess all the qualities, attributes, and ornaments of Buddhas. Now, that is clearly not the way we perceive the world around us. We have distinction between high and low, good and bad, and we don't see ordinary human beings to be like deities in a mandala. Now, it's quite clear that we don't have the Vajrayana view, because in the Vajrayana it talks about things like the 5 nectars and the 5 meats. Now the 5 nectars, for example, are urine, excrement, blood, semen, and brains. And what it is taught is that for a Vajrayana practitioner with pure view, then they see these things that we normally see to be defiled, like urine and excrement, etc., to be like holy nectars, to be like the nectar of the gods. And also then there are the 5 meats, which is human meat, cow meat, dog meat, elephant meat, and horse meat. Now if you're a Westerner, you might think, well, what's wrong with cow meat? We eat burgers every day. But you have to understand that the Vajrayana tradition evolved out of ancient India. And there, cows are considered to be the great mother. A cow is a deity. It's a very great sin to eat the meat of a cow. So for a Brahmin, for example, to eat cow would be a repulsive thing. What is it saying here in the Vajrayana? It's saying that somebody with pure vision or pure view does not see things to be good or bad, does not differentiate between excrement and nectar. But it's quite clear that we do differentiate. And for us, we do not see all beings to be equal, and we do not see all beings to be Buddha. For example, the other day, then there was another mass shooting in America, in Lewiston, Maine. And right now, as I record this video, then this shooter is still on the loose. And if we were to be walking down the road in Lewiston, Maine, and we saw somebody with an automatic rifle coming at us, then we would be afraid. We wouldn't see this to be a positive thing. I'm almost certain that we would all try to hide or protect ourselves in some way, and possibly the courageous amongst us might try to sacrifice their own life to save others. But either way, we wouldn't interpret this as a Buddha. We don't see this mass shooter to be a deity in union in a celestial palace, right? So what it says here is that we don't have the Vajrayana view. In fact, we're a long way off. Authentic Vajrayana practitioners are bodhisattvas on the pure levels. The pure levels are levels 8, 9, and 10. And they're called the pure levels because they have the full manifestation of non-dual wisdom. There is no differentiation. There are no Buddhas and there are no sentient beings. There is only non-referential compassion. So anyway, that's a very high view, and it's not for us. I mean, we're going to have to put a lot of effort in before we even get close to even understanding what these things mean. So the question is, how do we realize the Buddha nature? And then also, how do we know that we've realized it? If you're meditating and you think you've gained an experience of emptiness, then how do we know that that's an authentic experience and not merely a mental fabrication? And something you have to understand is that the vast majority of meditation practitioners rely only on fabrication. We hear terms and suggestions that have been induced by our teachers in teaching sessions and in guided meditation, and then when we sit on our cushions, we fabricate some kind of contrived understanding of the meaning of those words. Many people contrive an understanding of the phrase, all beings are Buddha. But when we look at the way in which we interact in a natural way with our environment, then we don't see everyone to be Buddhas. You have to be honest with yourself. There's no point in falling into self-deception. All that will happen is you'll waste years of your life on a practice that won't bring you any benefit and also is quite potentially harmful. So the first question is, how do we come to realize the Buddha nature? And then yesterday, I said that we had to start with study. Study is very important. And generally, we think of study as the progressive path, but actually, the progressive and the direct path are both forms of study. The progressive path relies on studying scriptures, teachings, concepts, ideas, theories, looking at illustrations, analogies, and metaphors. This is what we call the progressive path. And it's progressive, or what we call a leading path, because we're using conventional concepts and ideas to come closer to an understanding of something that is non-conceptual. It is beyond conceptual intellectual understanding. The direct path is still a form of study. And what is it that you study in the direct path? Well, you study the actual appearances to mind. So we all believe we have thoughts, right? And we all believe we have mind. And so what we do in the direct path is we look into what are those thoughts? Where did they come from? What are they made of? What is their essential nature? So if there is this Buddha nature that pervades all sentient beings, and in fact is the true nature of all phenomena, then this Buddha nature, this ultimate bodhicitta, must exist in everything. So logically, that exists in our thoughts, in our mind, our experiences. And as I've said before, it is quite difficult to look at outer objects and to understand their true nature, because we have this strong habituation to these things as being very solid and real. People tend to spout very high views, but when it comes down to it, it's only a trite belief. I'll give you a very simple example of this. You often hear people say that outer appearances are not real. Outer appearances are only illusions. But when we're walking down the street and there's a bus coming rushing at us, we immediately jump out of the way, right? And we do that because our natural, uncontrived belief is that this outer object is real, that this form that arises to our sense perceptions has a real outer referent. There is a real bus outside of me, and if I don't jump out of the way, then I'm going to get squashed. Likewise, if we see somebody running at us with an assault rifle, then we also run to hide, because we have a very natural and uncontrived belief in these sources of our sense perceptions. Sounds, forms, smells, tastes, all of these things we react with in a way that we accept their reality. So as I said, we need to study, and that's either through the progressive path, which is looking at analogies and theories and studying books, reading sutras, listening to teachings, etc. And then there's a direct path, which is looking at actual appearances to mind. It's not like the direct path is easier than the progressive path. In fact, it's taught that the direct path is much more difficult. If we look at that with practical examples, then unless you have a very high level of shamatha or calm abiding meditation, then you will not have the mental stability to be able to investigate something like a thought. I'll give you a very simple example. Try to visualize a red thought, let's say a round red dot. Now, if we're asked to do this, then although we assume it's something quite easy to do, in fact, it is quite difficult. And further, if you ask where did that thought come from, then we don't have the mental acuity to notice where it arises from. We don't really see where our thoughts come from or where they go to when they're finished. Also, when we're in the process of thinking about something, we are distracted by that cognitive process, and so we're not aware enough to actually analyze the thought. You can look into this for yourself, but I think you'll find quite quickly that it's much more difficult than you think. And in order to be able to undergo this investigation, one, you need mental stability and acuity. So you need a great strength of mind. And second, you're probably, more often than not, going to need a teacher, because you need to be guided. There are many pitfalls, and there are many ways that we can fool ourselves on. As I said, normally what we do in meditation is we fabricate feelings and experiences, and then we cling to those as being something special or important. And that distracts us from an honest investigation into the direct perception of reality. Now, having said that, then is it not possible for people to have spontaneous experiences of the true nature of mind, or to have sudden realization and enlightenment? Well, yes, that is what it's taught in the texts. The problem here is that if you look at what is taught in the texts, then it is only very special individuals who have these kinds of spontaneous enlightenment. For example, Guru Rinpoche, who was born from a lotus miraculously, then had a spontaneous experience of the true nature of mind just from his teacher pointing to the sky. Now, it is taught in the Nyingma tradition that there are three types of transmission. There is mind transmission. So that's a transmission of the truth of reality from one mind to the other. This is only for Buddhas. It's taught that it's only the Tathagatas, the transcendent conquerors, who can do mind-to-mind transmission. So that wasn't even what happened for Guru Rinpoche. The second type of transmission is the transmission by symbols. Now here, this is what they're talking about. This is the transmission of symbols. A flower, a simple symbol, like pointing at the sky, can be a catalyst for somebody who has a high level of potential to realize the true nature of mind. But if you look at the stories that are in the ancient texts, then these are only very, very special individuals. For example, Milarepa, who was an incredibly capable human being, was not able to receive the transmission of the Mahamudra through mere symbols. He had to go through a lot of hardship. And the final form of transmission is the transmission of words and scripture. And unfortunately, this is about the only way we have to come to realize the true nature of mind. But that doesn't mean that the true nature of mind doesn't arise from time to time for ordinary individuals. In fact, it is taught that it does arise from time to time. And it is compared with various analogies. For example, if you have two young people and they both love each other, but they don't know that they love each other. And so the boy is worried that he will be rejected by the girl, and the girl is worried that the boy will reject them. So they go on in this way without realizing their love for each other. But at some moment, when they come to recognize that they each love each other as much as the other, there is this moment of recognition. And not only that, there is a complete letting go of all the anxiety that they previously experienced. And this is an analogy, but also it is an example of an actual arisal of the true nature of mind to an individual. And another example that's given in the texts is if you have a very difficult job to do, something that requires great physical effort and also mental concentration. When that job comes to completion, then there is a complete letting go and an experience of the true nature of mind. But the problem is that when these things arise, we don't recognize them. What does that mean? We don't understand them for what they are. We don't understand the context of the true nature of mind arising to us. And so it doesn't really benefit us. What will happen is, as you progress along the path and you come to actual recognition of the true nature of mind, then you will be able to identify how that was present in these other moments. For example, hard work, or when young couples fall in love. So what is clear here is that if you want to realize the true nature of mind, then it's not something that's going to be easy. You have to dedicate yourself. If you take the progressive path, then you have to be diligent in your studies. You have to test not only your own understanding, but also the validity of the teachings. This isn't like other religions, where you are taught the most important thing is to have blind faith. In the Buddha Dharma, then you are taught to analyze for yourself, just as a goldsmith analyzes gold, to see whether it is authentic or not. So in this way, you have to see if the teaching is authentic or not. Now this reminds me of a video I watched recently, and there a young lady was asking a question of a teacher and said, well, if consciousness has no qualities, then how is it possible for everything to arise? Now she had a very valid question there, but the teacher couldn't give a satisfactory answer, and in the end he merely resorted to saying that she was wrong. Instead of accepting that there was a fundamental contradiction within the teachings itself, the teacher turned it back on the students and laid the blame on her, saying that she was mistaken. Now this is not the way to proceed in guiding a student to understand the true nature of reality, because the only way to come to understand the true nature of reality is to find out for yourself. And so, primarily, you have to test your own understanding, look for contradictions, and be open to the idea that maybe you've got it wrong. And secondly, you also have to test the teachings. If there are things that you cannot resolve with your own reasoning and with your own experience, then you have to consider whether or not this teaching is valid. So the second part of the question is, once you feel you've had a valid experience of the true nature of mind or emptiness, then how do you tell if this is mere self-deception and a mental fabrication, or if in fact it is an authentic realization or recognition of the true nature of phenomena? Well, we often like to quote this Japanese Zen master, Bankei Yotaku. And the reason why we like him so much is because we have this mistaken idea that he's teaching a shortcut or a lazy path to enlightenment. He teaches that the unborn is something that exists in all circumstances. And he says, all things are perfectly resolved in the unborn. Now we often interpret this to mean that there is no need to develop Buddhahood, or that there is no path to take, that there is a lazy way to enlightenment. So if we look at his own life story and see how he approached this question, how do you know if you've achieved awakening or if you've had a valid experience of the true nature of phenomena? Well, what Bankei did is that he sought out other teachers who could verify his experience of realization. The problem is that there were few people who had this realization, and so he traveled from monastery to monastery trying to find another teacher who could validate his experience. But he was unsuccessful. Eventually, Bankei heard that there was a Chan master in Nagasaki called Dosha Chogen, and so he sought his confirmation to validate his experience of the Buddha nature. Bankei presented his experience to the Chan master, but the Chan master said there was still something missing in his understanding, and so Bankei returned to the wilderness to meditate. What we can tell from the story is that this famous Zen master of the Rinzai movement, after having experiences of the true nature phenomena, sought confirmation from somebody with greater experience than his own. And also, what he discovered was there was still something missing in his understanding, and so he still had work to do. What we read from his life story was that Bankei was somebody of exceptional qualities. From a young age, he spontaneously went out into the wilderness, into his hermitage, in order to seek enlightenment. And so, for us ordinary beings of lesser capability, to think that gaining recognition of the Buddha nature is something simple that doesn't require any effort or discipline is quite laughable. There is a similar story in the Tibetan canon of the founder of the Drukpa Kagyu tradition, Pangmo Drukpa. He sought confirmation from Lord Gampopa. He was told by his Sakya teacher that he'd realized the true nature of mind, and so had reached the first Bodhisattva Bhumi. When he presented his experience to Lord Gampopa, Gampopa, who at the time was eating a bowl of sampa, said, "I would rather have this ball of sampa than your realization." This disheartened Pangmo Drukpa. He was distraught and went off into the wilderness, wondering how on earth he could have made such a mistake. But it was based on this criticism from Gampopa that he eventually came to understand the true nature of mind. And so, what are some of the signs and indications that you have got it wrong, that you've mistaken a purely worldly experience for the experience of the recognition of the true nature of mind? Well, in general, if you feel you've had some kind of special experience, like a mystical energy or a profound feeling of bliss, then this is almost certainly a sign that you've mistaken a purely mundane experience for the experience of the true nature of mind. You can generally tell from the language that people use. If they use a lot of high terms like limitless consciousness, infinite space, expansive awareness, or brilliant clarity, these are almost certain signs that what they're doing is they're fabricating a feeling in their mind and then convincing themselves that they've realized the true nature of phenomena. Another sign that you haven't actually recognized the true nature of phenomena is if you have this feeling that your recognition isn't stable, as if sometimes it's there and sometimes it isn't. People who have actual recognition understand the true nature of reality. They understand how things abide. So it's not a case of having to find it again. This feeling that one has to find one's experience again is a sign that there is an inner contradiction in their recognition, because the recognition of the true nature of phenomena is nothing other than understanding or seeing the way things abide unmistakably. And so that should never change. The question is whether or not, through this recognition, you have been able to undo your dense conceptual imputations and habitual tendencies. Our habitual tendencies have been ingrained from lifetime after lifetime, and so they're like stubborn stains. They will not be removed instantaneously merely by having recognition of the true nature of mind. However, with valid recognition of the true nature of phenomena, that recognition doesn't change, and it's not something that you need to recreate or find again. That will be stable. The problem is, through your thick habituation to negative tendencies, that you'll be continually distracted, and so it's not a question of your recognition being stable or not, like sometimes you recognize the true nature of mind, sometimes you don't. And also, it's not a question of holding a concept in your mind. For example, the concept that there is no observer and no observed, or the observer and the observed are the same. These are concepts. That is not recognition of the true nature of phenomena. The true nature of phenomena does not depend on your cognition. It does not depend on your thoughts and your ideas. So you have to abandon all these things, saying it's infinite consciousness, etc. Infinite consciousness is not something that we perceive, right? And also, as I said before, if your recognition is based on a special feeling, then that's also mistaken. Feelings are just appearances, and appearances themselves are not indicative of the true nature of mind. It's not that the true nature of phenomena or the true nature of mind does not exist in everything that appears. The problem is that it is not a feeling or an appearance itself. That is mistaken. Why is the Buddha nature, the true nature of mind, not a feeling or appearance itself? For example, the experience of silence, the experience of bliss. The reason why that is mistaken is because the true nature of all phenomena exists at all times. It does not exist merely within the feelings of bliss or the feelings of expansiveness or whatever feelings you might have. Those feelings are mere appearances. If the true nature of mind, the Buddha nature itself, is an appearance, then it's fallible, and it's not all-pervasive. So that is a mistake. For example, if we look at this previous quote from the sutras, the Sugata Garbha completely pervades all wandering beings. It's like butter and milk, right? Wherever there is mind, there is the Buddha nature. And so it's not dependent on a particular feeling or a particular appearance. That would be mistaken. And that's also a sign that you haven't understood. If in your understanding there are contradictions, then that is a sign that you haven't understood. For example, if you hold the belief that all beings are Buddha, and this understanding is valid, but for you, you do not perceive Buddhas in everyone. For example, some people annoy you. For example, if I contradict you, or if I say something that goes against the grain of your own belief system, and that irritates you, that is proof that you do not see me to be a Buddha. You just see me to be an annoying monk, right? So if there are these contradictions, then you haven't understood. If there are these inner conflicts or contradictions or paradoxes, then that is a clear indication that you have not understood the true nature of mind, the true nature of phenomena. You have not recognized the Buddha nature. Having said that, then these paradoxes are one of the most useful things for your practice. But they are only useful to you if you have a very open mind, if you can accept other ways of thinking about things. For example, if a paradox arises and you're able to accept that there is a conflict there, then from that you will grow in wisdom and knowledge. You will progress on the spiritual path. If someone like me challenges your position and that irritates you, then that's also a sign that you've misunderstood something. Because somebody who has recognition and understanding also has confidence in their point of view. They see it to be true, right? Recognizing the true nature of mind is recognizing the ontological truth. It's understanding the way things abide. And so, if somebody says something that contradicts that, and that is a mistaken statement, if I challenge you, how I challenge you is mistaken, then you won't get upset, you'll kind of laugh. It'll seem funny to you, because you know the way things are, right? So this is very important, and you need to be aware of this, because somebody who has progressed on the spiritual path becomes more open-minded and more accepting. In fact, they can accept anything. They don't get upset about it. And if there are challenges from others, then this does not create anger or irritation. In fact, quite the opposite. It helps to strengthen one's own understanding and realization. Along with recognition comes understanding, and with this understanding, we come to understand mind and thoughts and appearances. And it is the case that whatever appears to mind, and so, through understanding mind, we also understand appearances. And as one's understanding progresses, then eventually you lose all doubt and only gain certainty about this true nature phenomena. But that also applies to things like quantum mechanics. There are paradoxes within scientific theory, but these paradoxes are likewise resolved through the understanding of the Buddha nature. And so, be diligent in your studies, whether that's the study of the scriptures and the sutras, or if it is a direct study of mind and appearances. And also, you need to rely on somebody that you feel has more experience than you. The feeling that we can just go it alone and we'll be able to make significant progress on the spiritual path is very egotistical. And that's why it's so beneficial to read the life stories of the past masters. Because even if there are beings like Guru Rinpoche who are of the greatest type of potential, they still had to rely on teachers. And people like to say that the Buddha didn't rely on the teacher, but that was only in this life. If you read the story of the Buddha, then lifetime after lifetime the Buddha had relied on bodhisattvas and also on the previous Buddha Kashyapa. If we look at the life story of this Zen master, Bankei Yotaku, whom Westerners are very fond of, he sought confirmation from a Chan master to validate his experience of the Buddha nature. And by that interaction he came to discover that he still had some way to go. Of course, eventually, Bankei achieved total enlightenment, or Kensho. But this is not a simple thing. Remember, these past masters were of the greatest ability, and we are just ordinary sentient beings. And I know that this view of equality is very popular in the West, but it's a little bit unrealistic to think that all beings are exactly the same in terms of qualities and in terms of ability. If we think we're fine the way we are and we don't need to do anything to better ourselves, then we have no avenue for progress. This Buddha nature, the seed of enlightenment that we all possess, is basically useless to us unless we do something with it. I mean, be honest with yourself. How well you do in school very much depends on your diligence, even more so than your natural intelligence. So this is a good analogy here. Although I've never been to university, then I know that many Westerners have. Now, if you were to go to university, would you just sit there and do nothing and expect to get a degree at the end of the day? Of course you wouldn't. And maybe it has something to do with the fact that our tuition fees are so high. But also, we're looking to get something out of it because we're seeking employment or to better ourselves. And so it doesn't so much depend on your natural intelligence, but it depends on how much you apply yourself. For example, you could be the most intelligent person in the world, but if you never showed up to a single class and never did any of your homework, you wouldn't even pass your degree. And that's the same when it comes to the Buddha nature. Yes, we all have the potential to become a Buddha, but it doesn't do us any good if we're lazy and we don't apply ourselves. So please, I encourage you, don't accept things on face value and don't oversimplify the Dharma. Don't believe that you don't have to better yourself. You do have to better yourself because compared to a Buddha, then we are very ordinary beings. It's just the same as if you have a seed for a tree. If you don't give that warmth, moisture, fertilizer, the sunshine, then it will never grow into a fully matured tree. Although it's true that we all have this Buddha nature and it is the seed